Welcome to our discussion today. We are diving into some very interesting ideas about relationships, specifically how some people deal with wanting to be close to others, but also feeling scared of that closeness. All of this comes from a book called, quote, Understanding the Dismissive Avoidant Attachment Style, end quote, by Mindy Rivers.
It's a really important topic, Eloise, because this idea of wanting closeness but fearing it is at the very core of what we call the dismissive avoidant attachment style. It can be super confusing, not just for the people who love someone with this style, but also for the person themselves. They might seem very independent and not impressed by getting close to others on the outside, but inside, many of them really do want love, safety, and a sense of belonging.
That's a powerful point. It sounds like a real push and pull within them. So, when connection starts to feel real, what happens internally? What's going on that makes them suddenly feel threatened?
Exactly. When real connection starts to happen, their mind and body can react as if something dangerous is near. They might not even have words for this fear or truly recognize it as fear. Instead, they might just feel annoyed, restless, or have a strong urge to pull away. This is why their actions can seem to contradict each other. One moment they're reaching out to you, and the next they're retreating.
So, it's not about them being fake, but rather this internal conflict that's driving their behavior? What makes this paradox develop? Where does it come from?
It's not about being fake at all. It's often because they learned two very strong lessons early in life that just don't fit together easily. Like everyone, they learned that people matter. But they also learned through their own experiences that getting too close or relying on others could lead to feeling let down or pressured or even ashamed. When these two very different lessons live inside a person, adult relationships can bring both feelings up at the same time. They want to connect, but they also fear the possible pain of that connection. They reach for love, then quickly protect themselves from it. Their idea of safety became tied to emotional distance.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a survival mechanism from childhood that now creates issues in adult relationships. Can you give us an example of how this plays out in a relationship?
Sure. Imagine a dismissive, avoidant person meets someone and feels really drawn to them. At first, the relationship feels exciting and light. They might be very attentive and eager because early on, there's still a lot of space, which feels safe. But as the relationship grows, so do the expectations. The partner naturally wants more time, more commitment, more open feelings. This is when the avoidant person feels the relationship becoming, quote, real, end quote. That feeling of it becoming real can be the very thing that sets off their fear. They might start to feel crowded, want to slow things down, or even pick fights. They might become less loving. The partner feels confused because the avoidant person was so engaged at the start, and the avoidant person is also confused because they still care, but they feel this overwhelming urge to retreat.
It's a vicious cycle of confusion for both people involved. What specifically about closeness makes it feel so heavy and fearful for someone with this style?
The fear often comes from what closeness means to them. Closeness means that someone can become very important to you, and if someone matters that much, they can also let you down or reject you or see parts of you that you've kept hidden. They can start to influence your daily life, make requests, or have needs of their own. For someone with an avoidant style, all these implications can feel very heavy. They might not consciously think all of these things, but they'll just feel a sudden need to protect their independence. Independence often feels like the safest place they know. So when closeness threatens that independence, fear shows up. It can feel like a strong desire to be alone, even if they don't truly want to end the relationship.
So it's about protecting their autonomy, even if it's at the expense of the connection they secretly desire. This explains why they might seem to want love on their own terms, as the text mentions. What does that look like?
It means they might want closeness without having to be truly open about their feelings. They might want someone to be with them, but without emotional dependence. They might want affection only when it feels optional, not when it feels expected. They may want to be missed, but not needed. They may want to feel chosen, yet they might resist being truly known. People who love them often sense this, and it can be hurtful. They might feel like they're only allowed in a little bit at a time. The avoidant person often doesn't see it this way. They believe they're giving all they can, and in many cases, they are. The heartbreaking paradox is that their desire for love is real, but their fear limits how they can show it.
That's a tough situation for both sides. Another example often shows them being warm when their partner is busy or distant, then pulling away when the partner is available. Can you unpack that a little for us?
That's a very common pattern. The avoidant person might be loving and attentive when their partner is busy or when they've spent some time apart. They might text often, make plans, and seem very connected. But then, when the partner becomes more available and their relationship feels stable, the avoidant person becomes distant. The partner feels rejected and confused. The avoidant person might not understand their own change. They might say nothing has changed, or that they're just stressed, or that the partner is asking for too much. But underneath, the closeness might have started to feel like they're losing their own space. The avoidant person might have started to feel that the relationship is becoming something they cannot escape. That fear then triggers them to pull back, even though love remains.
Absolutely. Many dismissive avoidant people learned early on that having needs was dangerous. If they expressed a need and were met with ridicule, neglect, or even punishment, they learned to shut those needs down. They often became proud of not needing much from anyone. As adults, they may still have needs, yet they may not recognize them. They might feel lonely, yet they call it boredom. They might feel sad, yet they call it tiredness. They might feel overwhelmed, yet they call it irritation. When you do not recognize your own needs, it is hard to communicate them. Instead of saying, I need comfort, they withdraw. Instead of saying, I miss you, they stay busy. Instead of saying, I feel scared, they become critical. The paradox of needing others while fearing closeness is intensified when the avoidant person does not feel comfortable admitting need, even to themselves.
That's truly insightful. It highlights how their own internal struggle translates into relationship dynamics. This also sheds light on why they might seem more open or vulnerable after a breakup or when there's distance, only to retreat again once closeness is restored. It's a heartbreaking cycle.
It is. When the relationship is threatened, the fear of being trapped decreases for them. They might reach out or express emotion or seem suddenly vulnerable. The partner might feel hopeful and return. But once that closeness is restored, fear returns. This cycle is heartbreaking for both people. The partner feels played with. The avoidant person feels confused and ashamed. They might not want to repeat the cycle, yet they do not know how to tolerate closeness without feeling crowded. The paradox keeps pulling them back and forth.
So it's not a conscious manipulation, it's a deep-seated fear response. And when it comes to commitment, they might agree to it, even sincerely, but then their actions don't match their words. What's happening there?
Yes, it's a perfect example of the paradox. A partner might say, I need to know you are committed. The avoidant person agrees, perhaps even with sincerity. They might say, of course I am. But then later they avoid planning things, they avoid labels, and they avoid discussing the future. The partner feels that the words and actions do not match. The avoidant person might feel that they already said what needed to be said. They may not realize that commitment is not only a statement, it is a pattern of behavior. Their fear may be making them keep one foot out the door, because keeping one foot out feels like safety. The paradox is that the very thing that could create security in the relationship, which is commitment, is the thing that can trigger their fear of losing freedom.
This really helps to understand their actions from a different perspective. It doesn't excuse any pain they cause, but it does make them seem more human, as the book points out. It helps us see them as people, not just a set of behaviors.
That's the key takeaway here. Understanding this paradox does not require you to accept pain without limits. It does help you see the avoidant person as human. Many dismissive avoidant people are not trying to be distant for fun. They are trying to stay safe in the way they learned. They may have never experienced closeness that felt spacious. They may assume closeness always leads to pressure. They may not know how to negotiate boundaries without withdrawing completely. They may not know how to stay in emotional conversations without feeling flooded. The paradox lives in that lack of experience. They want love, and they do not trust what love will ask of them.
So, for a relationship to become healthier, the paradox has to be faced rather than acted out. How does that happen, and what role do both people play?
For a relationship to become healthier, the paradox has to be faced rather than acted out. Facing it means the avoidant person begins to notice that their urge to withdraw is often linked to feeling exposed or pressured. It means they begin to communicate before disappearing. It means they take responsibility for returning to repair. It means they practice staying present through discomfort instead of escaping. None of this is quick. It requires willingness. It also requires a partner who is not trying to chase them into closeness. The partner can offer steadiness, yet the avoidant person must do the work of staying open.
For partners and friends, understanding the paradox helps you stop taking the shifts as proof of your unworthiness. It helps you see that the push and pull is about the avoidant person's inner conflict, not about your value. It also helps you set clearer boundaries. You can have compassion for their fear and still require respectful communication. You can understand their need for space and still require consistent reconnection. You can love them and still refuse to live in a cycle of disappearing and returning without repair.
In the end, the paradox of needing others while fearing closeness is the central tension of the avoidant attachment style. It is the reason avoidant people can seem loving and distant in the same week. It is the reason they can want a relationship and resist it at the same time. When you understand this paradox, you begin to see that the problem is not that you are too much. The problem is that closeness triggers fear in someone who learned to equate safety with distance. That clarity can be sad. It can also be freeing. It allows you to make choices with open eyes, to hold compassion without losing yourself, and to move toward relationships where closeness is not something you have to beg for, but something that grows steadily and safely over time.
That's a profound shift in perspective. It moves away from personal blame to a more objective understanding of the dynamic. This leads us to the next important idea, which is that dismissive avoidant people aren't automatically bad people, even though their actions can cause harm.
Exactly. It's crucial to understand the difference between someone's behavior and their true character. When you have been hurt by dismissive avoidant patterns, it can be tempting to turn the person into a villain in your mind. That temptation is understandable. It is often the mind's way of trying to protect you from staying too long in confusion. If you can decide the person is simply bad, you can stop hoping, stop waiting, and stop making excuses. At the same time, many people who love dismissive avoidant individuals struggle with the opposite temptation, which is to excuse everything because they feel compassion. They may think they cannot help it, so I should accept whatever happens. Neither extreme is truly protective. Real protection comes from clarity and from seeing the person as human while also taking the impact seriously. This section is about holding that balance, because dismissive avoidants are not automatically bad people, and their patterns can still cause real harm.
So, how do we understand why they're not bad people when their actions can be so hurtful? To understand this, we need to remember that attachment patterns are often formed in a child's attempt to stay safe in their environment. Many dismissive avoidant people learned early that closeness did not reliably bring comfort. They may have been met with criticism when they were upset. They may have been expected to be strong too soon. They may have been surrounded by adults who were busy, overwhelmed, or emotionally distant. In those environments, a child often learns to keep feelings private. They learn not to rely too much. They learn to soothe themselves. They learn to show competence instead of need. Those lessons can look like independence in adulthood, yet they come from survival. When a person has built their sense of safety around not needing others, intimacy can feel threatening. This does not make them bad. It makes them someone whose early experiences taught them to protect themselves in a particular way.
that reframes it beautifully. It's not malice, but a learned defense. So when a partner wants to talk about feelings and the avoidant person shuts down, both people are experiencing something real, even though it's painful for the partner.
Yes, a common situation looks like this. A dismissive avoidant adult is in a relationship and their partner wants to talk about feelings. The avoidant person feels overwhelmed. They shut down or become defensive. The partner experiences this as being dismissed. The avoidant person may experience it as being pressured. Both experiences can be real at the same time. The avoidant person's reaction can be hurtful, and it can also be a reflex that developed long before this relationship. Seeing this does not erase the partner's pain. It simply helps you understand that the avoidant person is not necessarily trying to harm, even when harm occurs.
That's a crucial distinction. It's not about intention versus impact, but rather the intention isn't malicious. And you also mentioned that many of them do care deeply, even if they don't express it in a way that meets emotional needs. How do we recognize that care?
They may show love through reliability in practical matters. They may provide, fix, plan, and protect. They may be loyal. They may stay for years. They may not cheat. They may not lie. They may show up when something needs to be handled. Partners and friends often see these qualities and feel that the person must have a good heart. They are not wrong. The difficulty is that practical care does not always meet emotional needs. A person can be good-hearted and still be emotionally unavailable. This is one of the most painful truths in relationships because it means love can exist and still not be enough.
That's a very difficult truth to reconcile. So, how does one hold both these truths at the same time? The care they offer and the emotional distance they create.
Take this situation. The avoidant person helps you move, fixes something in your home, or handles a stressful task for you. You feel cared for, and you are. Later, you ask for emotional closeness, and they withdraw. You feel hurt, and you are hurt. If you conclude the person is bad, you erase the care they offered. If you conclude the person is good, so the withdrawal must not matter, you erase your own pain. A more accurate view is that the person may be good and still limited. They may have learned to love in ways that feel safe to them, while struggling to love in ways that feel emotionally connecting to you.
That's a powerful way to frame it. It's about acknowledging both realities. And you also talk about how dismissive avoidant people often experience shame, even if they don't show it. Why is that important to recognize?
It matters because they may not describe themselves as shame-based, yet many carry a quiet fear of being inadequate in closeness. They may feel that if they open up, they will be judged. They may fear that they will not know what to say when someone is emotional. They may fear that they will be expected to give comfort they do not know how to give. When they withdraw, they may later feel guilty. They may feel that they are failing at relationships. Instead of talking about this guilt, they often bury it, because admitting it would require vulnerability. From the outside, burying can look like indifference. From the inside, burying can be a way of staying functional. This does not make the harm disappear, yet it can help you see that the avoidant person is not a heartless machine. They are often someone who does not know how to be close without feeling exposed.
So, what appears as coldness might actually be a form of emotional self-protection or containment?
Exactly. Dismissive avoidance can look like coldness, but it is not always coldness. It is often a form of emotional containment. Many avoidant people believe that if they allow feelings to rise, everything will become unmanageable. They may have seen caregivers become overwhelmed. They may have been punished for expressing emotion. They may have been told to stop crying. They may have learned that feelings create chaos. So they become controlled. They become logical. They become composed. This can be useful in many areas of life. In intimate relationships, it can feel like absence. Again,
The impact can be painful, and the intention is often protection rather than cruelty.
That's a profound point. A frightened heart trying to stay safe, not a bad heart. How does this play out when a partner is upset and needs comfort?
One common situation looks like this. A partner is crying and wants comfort. The avoidant person freezes. They might offer a practical solution. They might leave the room. They might seem annoyed. The partner feels abandoned. The avoidant person may not feel like they are abandoning. They may feel like they are failing at something they don't understand. They may also feel trapped because they don't know how to be present without feeling swallowed by the emotion. Their reaction can still be harmful. The point is that harm does not always come from a bad heart. Sometimes it comes from a frightened heart that is trying to stay safe.
Holding on to the idea that they're not bad people sounds like it could be a protection for the person who loves them, too.
It does. Holding the truth that dismissive avoidants are not bad people can protect you from becoming bitter. Bitterness can feel like strength, yet it often keeps pain alive. If you turn someone into a villain, you may feel justified, and you may also feel stuck. Compassion can help you heal, even if you choose to leave. Compassion can allow you to grieve without hatred. It can allow you to remember good moments without denying reality. It can allow you to close a chapter with dignity. This is especially important if the avoidant person is a family member or a co-parent, where ongoing contact may be unavoidable. Seeing them as human can make that contact less corrosive to your own spirit.
However, you make a very important distinction that compassion is not permission or an excuse. What does that mean in practice?
At the same time, it is crucial to understand what this compassion is not. Compassion is not permission. Compassion is not an excuse. Compassion does not mean you tolerate repeated harm. A person can have an understandable history and still be responsible for how they behave now. If an avoidant person refuses to communicate, refuses repair, shames you for having needs, or repeatedly withdraws in ways that damage trust, those behaviors matter. You do not have to accept them because the person has a story. Everyone has a story. What matters in adult relationships is willingness. Is the person willing to learn? Are they willing to apologize? Are they willing to return to conversations? Are they willing to consider your experience? If they are not, then compassion may still be present, and you may still need to set limits that protect you.
So if they say this is just who I am, how does compassion and boundaries work together there?
One common situation looks like this. You name that disappearing hurts you, and the avoidant person responds by saying, "This is just who I am." That statement might be honest. It is also a refusal. Compassion can allow you to hear it without rage, and boundaries can allow you to respond with self-respect. You might think, "I understand you are built this way right now, and I am not willing to live with this level of inconsistency." That response does not make them bad. It makes you clear. Clarity is often kinder than endless arguing.
Does this understanding also help the avoidant person themselves?
Yes, absolutely. Understanding that dismissive avoidants are not bad people can also help avoidant individuals themselves. Many avoidant people carry an internal belief that they're defective in love. They may not say it out loud. They may act superior or dismissive to protect themselves. Yet underneath, some of them feel that they are not built for intimacy. If they believe they are bad, they may give up on growth. If they can see that their patterns make sense, given their history, they may feel more hopeful. Hope can open the door to effort. Effort can create change. This does not mean you wait for them to change. It means you understand that change is possible for those who choose it.
So in the end, it's about seeing the full picture of human complexity rather than painting someone as simply good or bad.
In the end, saying dismissive avoidants are not bad people is not a way to soften the reality of what they do. It is a way to tell the truth about human complexity. A person can be good and still hurt you. A person can love you and still be unavailable. A person can be wounded and still be responsible. When you can hold these truths together, you become less trapped. You stop swinging between blaming yourself and blaming them. You begin to stand in a clearer place. In that place, you can have compassion without rescuing, you can set boundaries without hatred, and you can choose what is healthiest for you without needing to make anyone the villain to justify your choice.
That clarity sounds like it opens a door to a very healthy way of approaching relationships. This leads us to our next major point, the power of compassion without rescuing. What does that mean?
Critical without rescuing is a strong way of showing care that protects both your heart and your dignity. It's being able to see someone's pain, understand their fear, but still refuse to take responsibility for what they will not take responsibility for themselves. This matters deeply in relationships with dismissive, avoidant people because it is easy to get pulled into the rescuer role. You see their tenderness beneath the distance. You sense their history. You know they are not trying to be cruel. Then you start working harder, being more patient, saying things more carefully, and carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. You call this love. Over time, it becomes a burden. Compassion without rescuing is what allows you to love without losing yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. So rescuing often starts with a good intention, wanting to help, but it becomes a trap.
Rescuing often begins with a beautiful impulse. You want to help, you want to soothe, you want to heal the relationship. If you have a strong heart, you may feel that leaving someone because they are afraid is unfair. You may think love is supposed to be loyal. You may also feel that you can handle it, that you can be the steady one. The trap is that rescuing turns your partner's or friend's growth into your job. You begin to manage their emotions. You anticipate their triggers. You soften your needs so they do not withdraw. You keep the relationship stable by becoming smaller. This is not compassion. This is self-abandonment disguised as kindness.
So when an avoidant person pulls away and you swallow your feelings to keep the peace, that's rescuing?
Yes, exactly. A common situation looks like this. The avoidant person pulls away after closeness. You feel hurt and you want to talk. You also know that talking might push them farther away, so you swallow your feelings. You tell yourself they need space. You try to be understanding. You wait. When they return, you act normal because you do not want to ruin the good moment. You have just rescued them from the discomfort of facing the impact of their withdrawal. You have also rescued the relationship from conflict by taking the pain into your own body. That might keep peace short-term. Long-term, it creates loneliness and resentment because your feelings do not disappear. They simply go underground. So, how does this compassion without rescuing actually change that inner stance and lead to a different outcome?
Compassion without rescuing begins with a different inner stance. It says, I can see that you are afraid, and I will not pretend it is not affecting me. It says, I can respect your need for space, and I also need communication and repair. It says, I can understand why you shut down, and I still require respectful behavior. This stance is compassionate because it does not shame the avoidant person. It is also firm because it does not allow the avoidant person's fear to become the ruler of the relationship. It gives both people a chance to show up as adults.
That makes a lot of sense. A big part of this must be recognizing what is truly yours and what belongs to the other person.
Precisely. Your feelings belong to you. Your boundaries belong to you. Your self-respect belongs to you. The avoidant person's fear belongs to them. Their choice to work on it belongs to them. Their willingness to repair belongs to them. When you rescue, you take their part. You start carrying their fear by building your life around it. You start carrying their responsibility by doing all the emotional work. Compassion without rescuing is refusing to carry what is not yours. It does not mean you are cold. It means you are clear.
So if an avoidant person disappears without explanation, how would compassion without rescuing guide a partner's response differently than if they were rescuing?
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person says they need space and disappears without explaining. If you rescue, you may spend the time trying to interpret their silence, blaming yourself, and preparing a perfect way to reconnect so they do not feel pressured. Compassion without rescuing would look different. You might still feel sad. You might still hope they are okay. You might send one calm message, and then you would return to your life. You would not chase, you would not beg, you would not punish. You would simply let their disappearance be their choice. When they return, you might name the impact and your expectation going forward. This is compassionate because you are not attacking them. It is not rescuing because you are not smoothing over the consequence of their choice.
That sounds incredibly empowering. It also changes the way you talk to yourself, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Rescuers often have a private story that they have to be good enough to make the relationship work. They think, if I just stay calm, if I just do not trigger them, if I just love better, they will relax. This story gives a sense of control. It also creates pressure and self-blame. Compassion without rescuing says, I can love well and I cannot love someone into emotional availability. It says, I can offer safety and I cannot do the work of growing up for someone else. That inner statement is empowering. It also lowers anxiety because it ends the endless striving.
It sounds like rescuing, ironically, can actually weaken the relationship by removing valuable feedback.
That's a very important point. This is especially important because rescuing can look like loyalty, and it can actually weaken the relationship. When you rescue, you remove the natural feedback that could motivate change. If the avoidant person withdraws and you quietly absorb it, they do not feel the impact. They may even believe everything is fine because you are still there. If you rescue their avoidance, you accidentally help them continue it. Compassion without rescuing allows impact to be felt. It allows the relationship to be honest. Honest relationships are the only ones that can truly change.
So, if a partner expresses feeling lonely and the avoidant person responds with irritation, saying they're too sensitive, what happens then with compassion without rescuing?
One common situation looks like this. You tell the avoidant person that you feel lonely. They respond with irritation and say you are too sensitive. If you rescue, you may apologize and say you did not mean it. You may try to lighten the mood. You may tell yourself you should not have brought it up. Compassion without rescuing would sound different inside you. You might think, they're overwhelmed and defending themselves, and I still deserve to be spoken to with respect. Then you might say, I am not willing to be called sensitive for sharing how I feel. If we are going to talk about this, we need to do it with respect. This is not a threat. It is a boundary. It is compassionate because it invites a healthier conversation. It is not rescuing because it does not take on the job of making them comfortable at the cost of your dignity.
That distinction between endurance and love is key too. Many people confuse suffering in a relationship with loyalty or love.
Yes, some people were taught early that love is shown through endurance. They may have learned that leaving is selfish. They may have learned that their needs are inconvenient. In adulthood, they become loyal in ways that hurt them. They stay in dynamics that drain them because they believe that is what a good person does. Compassion without rescuing is the moment you stop confusing endurance with love. It is the moment you realize that you can be kind and still say no. You can be empathetic and still walk away. You can care and still choose yourself. That realization is powerful, and for many people, it feels like waking up.
It sounds like a path to self-preservation. And part of that is allowing yourself to be disappointed, which many rescuers try to avoid.
That's right. Rescuers often avoid disappointment by holding on to potential. They focus on the avoidant person's good moments and imagine a future where those moments become consistent. They do not want to accept limits because limits hurt. Compassion without rescuing includes the courage to face limits. It says, I see what you can offer right now. I appreciate what is real. I also grieve what is missing. Grief is part of love. When you allow grief, you stop trying to force reality to be different. That is not resignation, it is acceptance. And acceptance is calmer than constant hope mixed with constant fear.
So, if an avoidant person repeatedly fails to follow through on promises to change, how does compassion without rescuing guide a partner to act differently?
One common situation looks like this. You realize the avoidant person does not follow through on promises to change. They apologize and repeat. They say they will communicate and then disappear again. If you rescue, you may keep giving chances without changing anything because you do not want to be unfair. Compassion without rescuing would look like changing your own behavior. You might say, I care about you, and I am not willing to keep doing this cycle. If it happens again, I will take space, or I will end the relationship, or I will change how I engage. The specific boundary is yours to choose. The point is that you stop rescuing them from consequences. Consequences are not punishments. They are the natural result of choices, and they are what teach adults what is real.
And this whole process must also extend compassion to yourself.
Yes. Many people who rescue are harsh with themselves. They criticize themselves for being emotional. They tell themselves they should be stronger. They judge themselves for staying. They judge themselves for wanting to leave. Compassion without rescuing begins with you. It says, it makes sense that I hoped. It makes sense that I cared. It makes sense that I wanted to fix it. And it also says, I am allowed to stop. When you offer that compassion to yourself, you become less reactive. You stop chasing love as proof of worth. You start choosing relationships that support your peace.
So in the end, compassion without rescuing is about a more mature and boundary-driven form of love.
It is one of the most mature forms of love. It is love that sees the other person clearly and does not turn away from their humanity. It is also love that refuses to disappear in the process. It is love with boundaries. It is love that understands fear and still requires respect. It is love that can stay if growth is real and can leave if growth is refused, without needing to become cruel to justify the choice. That is the power. It does not only protect you from being drained, it creates the only environment where an avoidant person could truly change, because change requires truth, and rescuing hides the truth under endless patience. Compassion without rescuing tells the truth with kindness, and that is what makes peace possible.
That's incredibly powerful. It sounds like a cornerstone of self-respect in any relationship dynamic. This brings us to our next pivotal point you raise, what it means to stop self-blame.
This is a real turning point that can change the rest of your life, which is the moment you stop making other people's limitations into your shame. Self-blame is not just a thought, it is a posture you take toward yourself. It is the habit of looking inward for the cause of someone else's distance. It is the way you automatically assume that if connection is not steady, you must be doing something wrong. In relationships with dismissive avoidant people, self-blame can become almost constant because the pattern is confusing. The person can seem loving and then disappear. They can say they care and then act cold. They can want closeness and then treat closeness like a threat. When you live with those shifts, your mind looks for an explanation, and self-blame often feels like the most controllable one. Stopping self-blame does not mean you become perfect. It means you become fair to yourself.
So self-blame often starts as a way to try and save the relationship, giving a false sense of control.
Yes, if you believe you caused the distance, then you can fix it. You can be calmer. You can be easier. You can ask in a softer way. You can learn the right timing. You can become less emotional. You can become more independent. This strategy gives you hope because it makes the outcome feel dependent on your effort. The pain is that this strategy keeps you trapped. You keep adjusting, and the pattern keeps repeating, and you begin to believe that you are fundamentally the problem. That belief slowly erodes self-esteem because it makes your basic needs feel like mistakes.
It sounds like a cruel loop. When you bring something up and they shut down, and you blame yourself for speaking too strongly, that's self-blame in action.
Exactly. One common situation looks like this. You bring up something that matters to you, and the avoidant person shuts down. You immediately think you spoke too strongly. You decide you should not have brought it up. You tell yourself you should have waited. You might even apologize for having feelings. In that moment, self-blame is doing two things. It is trying to restore closeness by making you smaller, and it is teaching you that your emotional truth is dangerous. Stopping self-blame begins when you notice this pattern and refuse to keep offering yourself as the sacrifice to keep the peace.
So it's not about avoiding all self-reflection, but changing the direction of that reflection.
Stopping self-blame does not mean you never reflect on your part. Healthy relationships require self-awareness. The difference is the direction of the reflection. Self-blame says, the distance happened because I am too much. Self-awareness says, I can look at how I communicated, and I can also acknowledge that a caring partner would still work with me. Self-blame says, I should not have needs. Self-awareness says, my needs are real, and I can choose how to express them. Self-blame says, if I were better, they would stay close. Self-awareness says, their capacity is theirs, and my worth is mine. This shift is subtle, and it is everything.
It's about not letting their pattern define your self-worth. If they withdraw after intimacy, how would stopping self-blame change your reaction?
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person disappears after intimacy. You start replaying the night. You wonder if you said something wrong. You wonder if you looked wrong. You wonder if you were too eager. You decide to act cooler next time. Stopping self-blame looks like recognizing that their withdrawal is a familiar pattern. It may be triggered by closeness itself. You can still consider whether you move too fast for your own comfort, yet you do not treat their retreat as proof that you are undesirable. You keep your dignity. You do not let their pattern rewrite your identity.
And accurately interpreting their behavior rather than taking it as a personal verdict seems crucial.
A big part of stopping self-blame is learning to interpret information accurately. In avoidant dynamics, a partner's withdrawal is often interpreted as a verdict. You think it means you are not good enough. You think it means you are not loved. It may mean something simpler. It may mean the avoidant person is overwhelmed. It may mean they do not know how to regulate closeness. It may mean they are afraid of dependence. It may mean they lack skills for repair. None of those meanings are flattering, and none of them require you to become smaller. When you interpret accurately, you stop taking on meanings that hurt you unnecessarily.
It sounds like accepting that you can't force someone into intimacy is also a part of stopping self-blame.
Yes, many people who blame themselves believe that if they could just be the right kind of partner, the avoidant person would become safe. They believe that love is a matter of finding the correct key. This belief is seductive because it gives you a job to do. It keeps you busy. It also keeps you from facing the truth that the other person might not be willing or able to do the work required. Stopping self-blame means stepping out of the fantasy that you can earn consistent connection through perfect behavior. It means accepting that intimacy is shared creation. If one person refuses to show up, the other person cannot build the whole thing alone.
So if you stop bringing up your needs because it always makes them pull away, that's paying for peace with your own silence. And it leads to loneliness, not actual peace.
Exactly. One common situation looks like this. You decide to stop bringing up your needs because every time you do, the avoidant person pulls away. You tell yourself you are being mature. Then you feel increasingly lonely. You wonder why you are unhappy because you are doing everything right. Stopping self-blame means allowing yourself to see that you have been paying for peace with your own silence. It means admitting that your loneliness makes sense. It means choosing to speak again, not with desperation, but with self-respect. You might say, I have been quiet because I did not want to push you, and I cannot keep being quiet. That statement is the opposite of self-blame. It is truth.
And when they minimize your emotions, how do you hold your reality without falling into self-blame?
Avoidant people sometimes minimize emotions, and when you share feelings, they may respond as if you are being irrational. If you are prone to self-blame, you may accept their framing.
You may start doubting your own perception. You may wonder if you are too sensitive. Stopping self-blame means you hold your own reality, even when someone does not validate it. You do not need them to agree that you are hurt in order to know you are hurt. You do not need them to approve your needs in order for your needs to matter. This is one of the strongest forms of self-respect, and it is a key part of healing.
So if they dismiss your hurt, you don't let their dismissal become your inner judge.
Yes. One common situation looks like this. You say you felt hurt by a comment, and the avoidant person says you are making a big deal out of nothing. Self-blame would lead you to back down and apologize. Stopping self-blame might sound like, I understand you did not mean it that way, and it still hurt me. Then you decide what you will do with the information. Will you ask for repair? Will you set a boundary? Will you take space? Will you reconsider the relationship? Whatever you choose, you are no longer letting someone else's dismissal become your inner judge.
It sounds like stopping self-blame is about changing your focus from individual incidents to the overall health of the relationship. Stopping self-blame often involves returning your attention to the long-term experience instead of the short-term mood. Self-blaming people tend to focus on each incident and ask, what did I do to cause this? When you stop self-blame, you begin asking, what is the ongoing environment I am living in? Do I feel safe? Do I feel valued? Do I feel free to be myself? Do I feel emotionally alone? These questions are not accusations, they are self-care. They bring you back to the reality that relationships should support your well-being, not constantly erode it. When you ask these questions, you stop twisting yourself into shapes to keep someone close. You begin choosing environments that let you stay whole.
Absolutely. For many people, self-blame is old. It began in childhood. If a caregiver was unpredictable, blaming yourself was a way to create a sense of control. You thought, if I am good enough, they will love me. That belief helped you survive. In adulthood, it becomes painful because it keeps you chasing love and questioning your worth. Stopping self-blame does not mean shaming yourself for having it. It means thanking it for trying to protect you and then choosing a new way. That new way is not dramatic. It is steady. It is the daily practice of being on your own side.
What happens to the relationship when one person stops self-blaming?
When you stop self-blame, the relationship may change. Sometimes the avoidant person responds well because you become clearer and less reactive. Sometimes they respond poorly because they were comfortable when you were quiet and accommodating. If they respond poorly, stopping self-blame becomes even more important. It helps you see that the relationship may have been held together by your self-erasure. That realization can hurt. It can also free you because it shows you what was actually happening. You were not failing at love. You were trying to build intimacy with someone who could not meet you, and you were paying the price with your self-worth.
So the ultimate goal of stopping self-blame is to reclaim your own worth and choose relationships that truly feel safe.
In the end, stopping self-blame means you no longer interpret someone's withdrawal as proof that you are not enough. It means you allow yourself to be human, to have needs, to have feelings, and to want closeness without shame. It means you accept that you can communicate with care and still be met with distance, and that distance is not your identity. It is someone else's coping strategy. When you stop self-blame, you begin living in a different emotional climate inside yourself. You become steadier. You become clearer. You begin to feel a quiet respect for yourself, and that respect becomes a kind of home. From that home, you can love more wisely. You can set boundaries more calmly. You can stay if there is real mutual growth, and you can leave if there is not, without needing to punish yourself for wanting love that feels safe. That is what it means to stop self-blame.
That's a beautiful way to put it, making your own self-respect a home. This leads us to our next point, understanding as the first step toward peace.
Many people think peace comes after a relationship becomes secure, after communication improves, after the other person stops withdrawing, or after a breakup is complete and healed. Those things can bring peace, yet they are not always available right away. Understanding is available sooner. It is the first step because it changes the emotional ground you stand on. When you understand, you stop living in confusion. You stop living in self-blame. You stop living in the belief that love is a puzzle you are failing to solve. That shift does not erase pain, yet it softens the inner fight. Peace often begins as the end of inner fighting.
So, confusion itself is a major enemy of peace. How does understanding help with that confusion in an avoidant dynamic?
Confusion is one of the loudest enemies of peace. When you do not understand what is happening, your mind stays busy. It searches for meaning. It looks for patterns. It replays conversations. It checks your memory. It tries to predict. This busyness feels exhausting because it never finishes. A dismissive avoidant dynamic creates confusion through mixed signals. There are warm moments that feel like love and cold moments that feel like rejection. There are promises and then withdrawals. There is closeness and then distance. The mind cannot relax in that environment because it cannot settle on one story. Understanding offers a story that can hold the whole pattern. It says, this is a push and pull around closeness. This is fear. This is a coping style. When your mind has a coherent story, it can rest more.
So understanding helps to name the pattern, which reduces the mystery and anxiety.
Exactly. One common situation looks like this. You wake up thinking about the relationship and you immediately feel tension. Your mind begins running through what happened last night, what the person said, what they did not say, what it might mean. Understanding can interrupt this. You can still think about the relationship, yet you are no longer spinning in the same way. You might think, we had a close moment and now they are pulling back. That is their pattern. You might also think, I feel anxious because inconsistency creates anxiety. That is my body responding. When you can name what is happening, the tension has less mystery. Mystery is what makes anxiety grow. Naming is what begins to calm it.
That's a very practical way to calm the nervous system. Understanding also brings us back to reality, moving away from constant interpretation.
Yes, many people in avoidant dynamics become trapped in a loop of interpretation. They interpret silence, they interpret tone, they interpret busyness, they interpret the way the person looks at them. Interpretation becomes constant because the relationship does not offer clear communication. Over time, interpretation becomes exhausting, and it also becomes unreliable, because when you are anxious, your interpretations tend to lean toward fear. Understanding shifts you from interpreting every moment to seeing the overall pattern. Instead of trying to decode each text, you begin to understand what closeness does to this person, what conflict does to this person, and what they do when they feel pressured. This does not make the behavior acceptable. It makes it predictable. Predictability is calming.
Predictability is calming, even if the behavior itself isn't pleasant. So understanding can help reduce shame when we find ourselves caught in these emotional swings.
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person is affectionate and you feel hope. Then they go distant and you feel panic. Without understanding, you might swing between these states and think, I am losing my mind. Understanding gives you a new frame. You can say, this is the cycle. My hope rises with warmth, and my fear rises with distance. Both reactions are normal. That frame reduces shame. Peace often begins when shame lifts, because shame adds a second layer of pain. Instead of only being hurt by distance, you also feel ashamed for being hurt. Understanding helps you be kinder to yourself, and kindness is a quiet form of peace.
It allows for a more considered response rather than reacting from a place of desperation.
Understanding is also the first step because it helps you stop making decisions from desperation. When you do not understand, you might make sudden choices to relieve pain, such as chasing for reassurance, begging for promises, threatening to leave, or cutting off contact abruptly. These choices are attempts to regulate overwhelming feelings. They may bring temporary relief and then more chaos. Understanding slows you down. It gives you enough space to choose. It helps you see that you do not have to respond immediately to every shift. You can wait, reflect, and decide what is true for you. That ability to choose rather than react is peace in action.
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person withdraws after conflict. You feel an urge to fix it right now because you cannot tolerate the uncertainty. Understanding can help you say, they are likely overwhelmed and chasing may increase withdrawal. You might decide to take a pause and return later. You might also decide to set an expectation for reconnection. The details matter less than the fact that you are choosing from clarity. When you choose from clarity, you respect yourself. Respect is calming because it tells your inner world you are safe with you.
That's a very clear way to create inner safety.
Understanding also helps you accept what you can't control.
Understanding is the first step toward peace because it helps you accept what you cannot control. Control is another enemy of peace. When you are in pain, you often try to control outcomes. You try to control the other person's mood, their availability, their interpretation of you, their willingness to talk, their willingness to commit. You do this because you want to feel safe. The problem is that you cannot control another person's attachment style. When you try, you become exhausted and anxious. Understanding helps you see where your control ends. It shows you that you can influence a relationship through communication and boundaries, and you cannot force someone to become emotionally available. Accepting that boundary between influence and control is painful and peaceful at the same time. It is painful because it ends fantasy. It is peaceful because it ends futile effort.
And it helps you take responsibility for what is truly yours, which is your own well-being.
Understanding also helps you take responsibility for what is actually yours. This is a different kind of responsibility than self-blame. It is the responsibility of protecting your well-being. It is the responsibility of staying honest with yourself. It is the responsibility of choosing what you will tolerate. When you understand, you stop focusing on how to make the avoidant person change and start focusing on how to care for yourself in this dynamic. You might build a stronger support system. You might practice boundaries. You might decide to stop chasing. You might decide to have a direct conversation about expectations. You might decide to leave. Whatever you choose, you are taking the kind of responsibility that creates peace because it puts you back in your own hands. If you've been living with chronic loneliness in the relationship, understanding helps you name that truth.
One common situation looks like this. You realize you have been living with a chronic feeling of loneliness. You might have minimized it because the relationship has good moments. Understanding allows you to name the loneliness without shame. You can say, I feel lonely in this relationship. That is an honest statement. From there, you can decide what you need. Peace begins when you stop arguing with your own reality. If you are lonely, you are lonely. You can respect that truth. Respecting truth is a steadying act.
It sounds like understanding also helps improve communication, making it less reactive. Understanding also helps you communicate more clearly, which can reduce conflict. Many avoidant relationships become messy because neither person feels understood. The avoidant person feels pressured. The partner feels dismissed. Both react. Understanding allows you to speak in a way that is less reactive. You might say, I know closeness can feel intense for you, and I need a clear plan for reconnecting when you take space. That kind of communication is not begging. It is not blaming. It is naming needs and naming patterns. Whether the avoidant person can meet that request is another question. The point is that you're speaking from clarity, and speaking from clarity reduces inner turmoil.
And finally, understanding helps you hope more wisely for things that are actually possible. Peace also grows when understanding helps you stop hoping for the wrong thing. Many partners hope the avoidant person will become affectionate all the time, or that they will suddenly love in the way the partner loves. That hope is understandable, and it often leads to disappointment. Understanding helps you hope more wisely. You might hope for honest communication, consistent effort, and willingness to repair. Those hopes are still real, and they are also measurable. You can watch whether they happen. Measurable hope is less painful than vague hope because it is grounded. Grounded hope brings peace because it reduces endless waiting.
So, understanding is truly the first step toward inner peace because it changes your relationship with your own mind and heart.
In the end, understanding is the first step toward peace because it changes your relationship to your own mind and heart. It helps you stop spinning. It helps you stop blaming yourself. It helps you stop chasing control. It helps you stop living in fantasy. It brings you into reality, and reality is where you can breathe. You can still love someone and see their limits. You can still grieve and stay dignified. You can still feel pain and stop being consumed by it. Peace is not the absence of feeling. Peace is the presence of clarity and self-respect. Understanding is how you begin.
That's a powerful statement, and it leads us directly into our next conversation about seeing dismissive avoidance with clearer eyes. It's not about being cold, but about being honest.
Clearer eyes do not mean colder eyes. They mean more honest eyes. They mean you see the person's good qualities without exaggerating them into promises. You see their pain without turning it into a reason to accept neglect. You see their limitations without needing to hate them. When you see more clearly, you stop getting pulled into the same emotional loops. You stop trying to decode every moment. You stop making yourself smaller to keep someone close. Clearer eyes create a steadier heart.
Many people start with hope when they relate to avoided individuals, believing they'll open up with trust. But this hope can turn into denial.
Hope isn't foolish. It's a beautiful human instinct. The problem comes when hope turns into denial. Denial happens when you keep ignoring repeated experiences because you want the relationship to become what you imagine it could be. Clearer eyes allow hope to become more mature. Mature hope is not based on what you wish were true. It's based on what you can actually see happening over time.
So if there's a warm weekend, but then a withdrawal, clearer eyes would acknowledge both realities.
Yes, one common situation looks like this. The avoidant person has a warm weekend with you, and you feel that the relationship has turned a corner. You think this is it. We're finally safe. Then the person withdraws and goes quiet. Clearer eyes do not argue with the warm weekend. They also do not let the warm weekend erase the pattern. You can say, that weekend was real, and withdrawal after closeness is also real. If both are real, then my life in this relationship will likely include both unless something changes. This simple thought can bring relief because it ends the constant swing between fantasy and shock. You are no longer surprised by the same pain.
Dismissive avoidant people can be affectionate when they feel free. They can be tender in moments that do not feel binding. They can be emotionally open when they feel no expectation is attached. Clearer eyes notice that their warmth is often connected to how safe they feel, not only to how much they love you. This is important because many partners treat warmth as proof of commitment. Warmth can be proof of feeling. It is not always proof of capacity. Clearer eyes allow you to appreciate warmth without using it as a promise you build your life around.
That's a very nuanced distinction. And another part of seeing clearly is observing how they respond when things are difficult, not just when things are easy.
Many relationships look good when life is easy. The real test of emotional availability is what happens when there is conflict, disappointment, stress, or vulnerability. Dismissive, avoidant people often struggle most in those moments. They may shut down, disappear, minimize, or become defensive. Clearer eyes look at that response as information, not condemnation, information. It tells you what it is like to try to repair with this person. It tells you how safe you will feel when you need comfort. It tells you whether the relationship can hold real life, not just good days.
So if a partner is upset and the avoidant person leaves, how do clearer eyes process that rather than through hope or fear?
One common situation looks like this. You are upset and want to talk. The avoidant person says they do not want to discuss it and leaves. Later, they return acting normal. If you are seeing through hope, you might focus on the return and feel relieved, telling yourself it is fine. If you are seeing through fear, you might panic and chase, trying to force the conversation.
Clearer eyes would recognize the pattern and its impact. You might say to yourself, "This person copes by shutting down, and that leaves me alone in distress." Then you decide what you will do with that information. You might set a boundary. You might ask for a repair. You might take space. You might reconsider the relationship. The clarity is that you do not tell yourself the shutdown was nothing. You also do not tell yourself you are too much for wanting repair. You simply see what happened.
This involves seeing their strengths without romanticizing them, understanding that qualities like calm or self-sufficiency can also mask emotional absence.
Avoidant people can be calm. They can be self-sufficient. They can be reliable in practical ways. They can be steady in crisis. These traits can be wonderful. They can also be used to hide emotional absence. Clearer eyes can hold both truths. You can admire the calm and still notice the lack of emotional responsiveness. You can appreciate the independence and still notice the refusal to engage in repair. You can respect the competence and still notice the unwillingness to be vulnerable. When you hold both truths, you stop making their strengths into a reason to accept their blind spots.
And how they respond to boundaries reveals a lot about their willingness. Boundaries really show someone's true character and willingness. When you say, "I need consistent communication," a willing person will feel discomfort and still try. They may not be perfect, they will move toward growth. An unwilling person will dismiss, blame, or punish you for having needs. Dismissive avoidant people can fall into either category depending on their awareness and effort. Clearer eyes do not assume one or the other based on hope. They watch. They pay attention to follow through. They pay attention to how the person behaves when they are not getting their way.
So if they agree not to disappear, but then repeat the behavior, the repetition is the truth, not the agreement.
Yes, one common situation looks like this. You say you are not okay with disappearing for days without contact. The avoidant person agrees and then repeats the behavior. Clearer eyes do not stay focused on the agreement. They focus on the repetition. Repetition is truth. This does not mean you must hate the person. It means you stop talking yourself out of what you are living with. The clearer you see the repetition, the more your nervous system can relax because it is no longer trapped in uncertainty. You may feel grief, yet grief is cleaner than endless confusion.
And what about our own longing in these dynamics? Clear eyes help us understand that too.
In avoidant dynamics, many people confuse longing with compatibility. The relationship feels intense because you are frequently deprived. When closeness appears, it feels like oxygen. That can create a strong bond. Clearer eyes recognize that craving can be created by scarcity. If you only get warmth sometimes, you may become preoccupied with getting it again. This preoccupation can feel like love. It can also be a sign that the relationship is dysregulating you. Clearer eyes help you ask a different question. Instead of asking, "Do I want them?" you ask, "Do I feel well with them?" That question is often life-changing.
If you miss them intensely when they're gone, but then feel relief when they return, clearer eyes would interpret that differently.
One common situation looks like this. You miss the avoidant person intensely when they are gone. When they return, you feel relief and you think, "This proves they are the one." Clearer eyes might say, the relief is partly about them and partly about the end of uncertainty. The intensity is not always a sign of deep compatibility. It can be a sign of a nervous system that has been kept in suspense. When you understand this, you stop using longing as your only guide. You begin valuing steadiness more.
And they might also protect themselves with stories or excuses for their behavior. Clearer eyes look beyond the stories to their actions.
They may say they are just busy. They may say you are too sensitive. They may say relationships are not supposed to be that emotional. They may say they need space because you are demanding. Some of these statements may contain a grain of truth. Clear eyes do not get hypnotized by the story. They look at behavior. They ask,
Does this person return and repair, or do they disappear and then expect everything to be fine? Do they take responsibility, or do they make my needs the problem? Do they show consistent effort, or do they offer words without follow-through? These questions are not harsh. They are adult.
This whole perspective helps protect your compassion from turning into self-sacrifice. You can still feel for them, but you're not betting your life on their potential.
When you see clearly, you can still feel for the person. You can still understand that fear drives their behavior. You can also see that fear does not automatically lead to growth. Many people live with fear and never face it. Clearer eyes allow you to stop betting your life on someone else's potential. You can stop telling yourself that if you just wait long enough, they will become ready. You can instead look for willingness now. If willingness is present, you can choose to grow together. If willingness is absent, you can choose to protect yourself.
So, seeing dismissive avoidance with clearer eyes isn't about judging them, but about staying grounded in truth.
In the end, seeing dismissive avoidance with clearer eyes is not about diagnosing them or judging them. It is about staying in truth. It is about letting the relationship show you what it is. It is about valuing your lived experience over your fantasies. When you see clearly, you become less reactive. You become less confused. You become less tempted to shrink. You may still love, you may still grieve, you may still hope in a wiser way, and you will be far less likely to lose yourself in the process. Clearer eyes do not shut down the heart. They steady it. They help you keep compassion and self-respect in the same room, which is where real peace begins.
That's a wonderful summary, and it ties into our next point, that knowledge itself can be a form of protection. It's not about hope alone.
Protection isn't always dramatic. Sometimes protection is simply the ability to recognize what is happening before it takes you down. It is the ability to name a pattern while it is unfolding. It is the ability to remember who you are in the middle of someone else's distance. In relationships with dismissive, avoidant people, many partners and friends feel exposed because the dynamic is unpredictable. Warmth arrives and disappears. Promises are made and then avoided. Repair is offered and then withdrawn. In that environment, your heart keeps reaching for steadiness. Knowledge protects you by giving you steadiness inside yourself. It gives you a way to stay grounded even when the relationship is shaky.
So, knowledge can reduce the shock and the double hurt of something unexpected happening?
Yes, shock is a hidden source of pain. When something hurts and also surprises you, it hurts twice. The first hurt is the event. The second hurt is the feeling that you did not see it coming. Avoidant dynamics create a lot of this double hurt. You might have a tender conversation and then be met with silence the next day. You might feel close and then feel the door close. You might think you finally resolved something and then watch it repeat. Knowledge helps you see that these shifts are not random. They are part of a cycle that tends to appear when closeness increases or when emotion becomes intense. When you expect the cycle, you are less shocked by it. You may still feel sadness, yet you are less likely to be thrown into panic.
And this knowledge also protects you from self-erasure, from becoming smaller in the relationship.
Many people in avoidant relationships become smaller over time. They do not do this in one big moment. It happens through tiny choices. They stop bringing up hurt. They stop asking for reassurance. They stop sharing dreams. They stop requesting repair. They begin to live on the avoidant person's terms because it feels safer than conflict. Knowledge makes these tiny choices visible. It helps you see that you are adjusting in ways that cost you your voice. Once you can see that, you can decide to stop. You can decide to return to yourself. That return is protection because losing yourself is one of the deepest harms a relationship can cause.
It sounds like it's about seeing when you're managing someone else's fear instead of being in a mutual relationship.
One common situation looks like this.
You notice you are rehearsing everything before you say it. You are trying to make your words so gentle that they will not trigger withdrawal. Knowledge helps you recognize that you are managing someone's fear instead of being in a mutual relationship. That recognition can be painful. It can also protect you because it helps you stop living in constant self-editing. You might still choose tact, you might still choose timing, yet you stop treating your basic emotional truth as a problem to hide. That is protection of self-worth.
And knowledge helps distinguish between understandable behavior and acceptable behavior. An explanation isn't an excuse.
Knowledge protects you by helping you distinguish between understandable behavior and acceptable behavior. Many avoidant behaviors are understandable. Withdrawal can come from overwhelm. Minimizing can come from fear. Emotional distance can come from old learning. Understanding can soften your anger and reduce personalization. Without knowledge, though, understanding can turn into tolerance. You might accept things that harm you because you feel compassion. Knowledge protects you by giving you a stronger framework. It reminds you that explanation is not an excuse. It reminds you that impact matters. It reminds you that love is not measured only by intention, but also by behavior over time. This is a protective truth because it prevents you from using empathy as a reason to abandon yourself.
So, if an avoidant person says they can't do emotional conversations, knowledge helps you decide what you will and won't accept.
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person says they cannot do emotional conversations and that you should just accept them as they are. Without knowledge, you might feel guilty for wanting more, and you might decide to settle. With knowledge, you can hear that statement for what it is. It is a boundary they are setting about their capacity, and it is also information about what your future will look like if nothing changes. Knowledge protects you by helping you decide what you will and will not accept. You might choose to stay if they are willing to grow. You might choose to leave if they are not. Either way, you are no longer trapped by guilt and confusion.
And knowledge also provides the language for setting those clear boundaries.
Knowledge also protects you by giving you language for boundaries. Many people struggle to set boundaries because they cannot quite explain what is wrong. Avoidant dynamics can be slippery. The avoidant person can argue that nothing happened. They can say you are overreacting. They can focus on details and deny impact. Knowledge helps you speak more clearly. You can name the pattern rather than only the event. You can say, when you pull away after closeness without communicating, I feel unsafe, and I need a clear message and a plan to reconnect. That kind of boundary is protective because it is specific. It also makes it easier to see whether the person is willing to meet you in mutual effort.
So, if every time you bring up something serious, they disappear, knowledge allows you to address the real issue.
One common situation looks like this. You notice that every time you bring up something serious, the avoidant person disappears. Without knowledge, you might keep trying new ways to bring it up, thinking the problem is your phrasing. With knowledge, you can see that the problem is their avoidance of emotional intensity. You can then set a boundary that addresses the real issue. You might say, I will not keep being in a relationship where we cannot talk about hard things. If we cannot return to conversations after a pause, then this does not work for me. That boundary protects you because it changes the rules of engagement. It also allows you to stop blaming yourself for a pattern that is not yours to solve alone.
Knowledge also helps you measure true willingness and growth beyond just good moments.
Knowledge protects you by helping you measure willingness. In avoidant relationships, many people cling to good moments as proof that the relationship is improving. They may see a tender conversation and think, we are healed. Knowledge helps you look for steadier signs. Does the person follow through? Do they come back after taking space? Do they apologize? Do they show curiosity about your experience? Do they make changes over time? These are not tests. They are indicators of whether growth is real. This kind of measurement is protective because it keeps you from being pulled along by moments that feel beautiful but do not translate into a safer daily life.
This ultimately widens your choices beyond just suffering or leaving in anger.
Knowledge also protects you by widening your choices. When you do not understand what is happening, you often feel trapped between two painful options. Either you stay and keep suffering, or you leave and feel like you are abandoning someone you love. Knowledge introduces other options. You can stay and change how you engage. You can set clearer boundaries. You can stop chasing. You can focus on your own life. You can seek support. You can require counseling. You can also leave with compassion rather than rage. These options reduce helplessness. Helplessness is one of the most painful emotional states. Knowledge protects you by reducing helplessness because it gives you a sense that you have choices even in a hard situation.
So, if the avoidant person is distant and you feel that familiar fear of being left, knowledge helps you anchor yourself.
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person is distant, and you feel the familiar fear that you will be left. Without knowledge, you might cling tighter, which often creates more distance. With knowledge, you can choose to anchor in yourself. You can remind yourself that you can survive uncertainty. You can remind yourself that your worth is not on trial. You can remind yourself that you will not beg for love. You can reach out to a friend. You can go for a walk. You can do something that brings you back to your own life. These choices are protective because they keep your identity from being swallowed by the relationship.
And this protection can extend to future relationships too, helping you avoid repeating this same dynamic.
Knowledge also protects you from repeating the same dynamic in future relationships. Many people leave an avoidant relationship and then find themselves in another one. This happens not because they are doomed, but because the familiar feels familiar. If you learn to earn closeness through effort, avoidant people can feel compelling. They make love feel like something you must win. Knowledge helps you notice that feeling and question it. It helps you see that a steady partner might feel less intense at first, and that less intensity can actually be safer. This protection is long-term. It is the protection of your future.
So knowledge as protection isn't about becoming negative, but about gaining clarity.
In the end, knowledge as protection is not about becoming cynical. It is about becoming clear. It is about understanding patterns so you can stop being harmed by surprise, self-blame, and endless chasing. It is about protecting your self-worth by refusing to interpret someone else's fear as your failure. It is about protecting your peace by making choices that are grounded in reality. Knowledge does not guarantee that a particular relationship will work. It does guarantee that you will be less likely to lose yourself while trying. That is protection, and it is one of the most loving gifts you can give yourself.
That's a very empowering idea, to be able to protect yourself with knowledge. This brings us to our final point, which is that clarity ultimately leads to freedom.
Clarity is freedom because it releases you from the exhausting job of guessing what's happening. It releases you from the belief that love is something you have to earn by making yourself smaller. It releases you from the habit of measuring your worth by how available someone else is. When you have been close to a dismissive avoidant person, you may have spent months or years in emotional suspense. You may have been waiting for the relationship to feel steady. You may have been waiting for the person to finally relax into love. You may have been waiting for the day when closeness stops triggering withdrawal. Clarity does not promise that day will come. It gives you something else, which is the ability to live fully, even if that day does not arrive.
So freedom isn't always about leaving a relationship, but about how you are in it.
That's right. Freedom does not always mean leaving. Sometimes freedom means staying without losing yourself. Sometimes it means stepping back from chasing and returning to your own life. Sometimes it means setting boundaries that create a new kind of relationship, one that is more honest and less confusing. Sometimes it means walking away, not enraged, but with the quiet knowledge that you have done enough. Whatever path you choose, clarity is what makes it yours. Without clarity, you are dragged by the pattern. With clarity, you choose.
And clarity helps us stop those cruel, self-blaming stories that make us believe we're the cause of their distance.
A lot of people want the pain of avoidant relationships to mean something about their value. They want a reason that feels personal because personal reasons feel controllable. If the distance is because you were not good enough, then you can become better. If the person withdrew because you were too emotional, you can become less emotional. If the relationship failed because you made a mistake, you can avoid that mistake next time. These stories feel logical, and they are also cruel. They turn love into a test. They turn your heart into a project. Clarity is freedom because it replaces these stories with something more truthful. It says, this person has a pattern. This pattern affects me. My needs are real. My worth is constant. From that truth, you can stop trying to buy love with self-erasure.
So instead of replaying the past and punishing yourself, clarity allows you to see the reality of what was happening.
One common situation looks like this. You're replaying the past and imagining how you could have saved the relationship. You think about the texts you should not have sent. You think about the conversation you should have phrased differently. You think about the moment you should have stayed quiet. Clarity is freedom because it allows you to stop rewriting history to punish yourself. It allows you to see that you were responding to real distance. It allows you to see that a relationship that requires perfect behavior to survive is not a safe relationship. You may still learn from the past. You simply stop using the past as proof that you were unworthy of love.
And clarity helps you distinguish between true love and that intense longing born out of scarcity.
Clarity is also freedom because it helps you distinguish between love and longing. Longing can be intense in avoidant dynamics because the relationship often withholds and then offers closeness. That pattern can make you crave the good moments with a strength that feels like destiny. Clarity helps you see that craving is not always a sign of deep compatibility. Sometimes it is the sign of emotional scarcity. When you see that, you stop being mesmerized by intensity. You begin valuing steadiness. You begin asking whether you feel safe, not only whether you feel drawn. That shift can change everything about who you choose and what you tolerate.
So, if the avoidant person returns with affection, clarity allows you to receive it without losing your grounding.
One common situation looks like this. The avoidant person returns after distance with affection and promises. You feel relief and you want to believe. Clarity is freedom because it allows you to receive the affection without surrendering your reality. You can appreciate warmth and still remember the pattern. You can accept an apology and still require change. You can enjoy connection and still keep your boundaries. When you can do that, you are no longer trapped by the cycle of being pulled in by closeness and then shattered by withdrawal. You become steadier. Steadiness is a kind of freedom.
And this freedom also brings your focus back to what you can actually control.
Clarity is also freedom because it brings your focus back to what you can control. You cannot control whether someone is avoidant. You cannot control whether someone chooses growth. You cannot control whether someone becomes emotionally available. What you can control is how you respond, what you accept, and what you build around you. You can control whether you keep your friendships alive. You can control whether you care for your body. You can control whether you tell the truth to yourself. You can control whether you keep returning to a dynamic that makes you smaller. When you begin to focus on these choices, your life becomes less about the avoidant person's moods and more about your own values. That is freedom.
And this freedom and clarity can also be for the dismissive avoidant person themselves if they choose to embrace it.
Yes, if you are a dismissive avoidant person, clarity can also be freedom for you. You may have spent years feeling frustrated in relationships, feeling crowded, feeling misunderstood, and feeling pressured. You may have told yourself that you simply have not met the right person. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes the deeper truth is that closeness itself activates a fear you learned long ago. Seeing that clearly can be hard. It can also be liberating because it gives you a place to begin. When you recognize that withdrawal is a strategy, you can start practicing a different strategy. When you recognize that shutting down hurts people, you can start learning repair. When you recognize that independence does not have to mean isolation, you can start building intimacy that still respects your need for space. Freedom for you would look like being able to stay present without feeling trapped. And that is a possible kind of growth if you choose it. And for partners and friends, clarity must feel like stopping the feeling of being crazy. For partners and friends of avoidant people, clarity can be the moment you stop feeling crazy. You stop feeling as if you are imagining the distance. You stop feeling as if your needs are unreasonable. You stop feeling as if you have to compete with work, hobbies, or silence to be chosen. You start seeing the pattern for what it is, and you start seeing yourself with more kindness. That kindness is not soft weakness. It is the recognition that you have been trying to love someone through inconsistency, and that anyone would struggle in that environment. Clarity is freedom because it allows compassion to become healthy. You can feel compassion for an avoidant person without turning it into a mission. You can understand their fear without excusing disrespect. You can see their humanity without offering your well-being as payment for their comfort. Compassion without clarity becomes rescuing. Compassion with clarity becomes boundaries. Boundaries do not kill love. They protect love from becoming a place where you disappear.
So if you realize you've been tired from constantly managing the relationship, clarity allows you to name that truth.
One common situation looks like this. You realize you are tired, and you have been tired for a long time. You feel that you are always managing the relationship. You are always thinking about what will set them off. You are always trying to keep things calm. Clarity is freedom because it allows you to name that fatigue as truth. You do not have to prove you are loyal by staying exhausted. You do not have to prove you are loving by accepting loneliness. You can decide that love should feel like a place where you can rest, not a place where you are always bracing.
And finally, choosing relationships that support your growth rather than repeating old wounds.
Freedom also looks like choosing relationships that support your growth rather than your old wounds. Many people are drawn to avoidant partners because the dynamic feels familiar. It feels like home, even if home was not safe. Clarity helps you recognize that familiarity is not always guidance. It is sometimes repetition. When you see that, you can choose differently. You can choose people who communicate. You can choose people who repair. You can choose people who are emotionally present. If you do not have those people yet, you can still build a life that supports you. You can build friendships that are warm. You can build routines that soothe you. You can build a relationship with yourself that is steady. Clarity is freedom because it begins all of this.
So clarity isn't about winning or proving someone wrong, but about seeing what's true with kindness.
Clarity is simply seeing what is true with kindness. It is recognizing patterns without panic. It is valuing your own experience without shame. It is letting love be real, not a project you keep trying to fix. When you live with clarity, you become freer because you stop being controlled by confusion. You stop being controlled by hope that never has to face reality. You stop being controlled by the urge to earn what should be mutual.
And what is the ultimate message that this book offers?
The ultimate message from Mindy Rivers in, quote, Understanding the Dismissive Avoidant Attachment Style, end quote, is this. You deserve a love that does not require you to disappear. You deserve connection that is steady enough that you can breathe. You deserve repair when there is hurt. You deserve respect when you speak your truth. Whether you find that with a dismissive, avoidant person who chooses growth or with someone else entirely, clarity will protect you and guide you. Clarity will help you stop self-blame. Clarity will help you build healthier expectations. Clarity will help you choose peace. That is why clarity is freedom.
Thank you, Chloe, for this insightful conversation. If you found this discussion helpful, please share it with a friend who might benefit from understanding these ideas.